We're on chapter 8, the direct object. So we'll go over the vocabulary one more time, starting on page 60, the column on the right at the top. We'll go over the pronunciation. A share. A share means that, which, who, where. It's all that kind of stuff. We have bane, which means between. And it has the yod in between it, so you don't get it confused with the word for son. And then we have the root for the word to be, haya. It's to be, and, is, was, that kind of stuff. Then the word ma, and they give you a few different pronunciations there. And I think as far as we're concerned, most times just think of it as a question for right now. Whenever you see that word, ma. There's no punctuation in the Hebrew. Next word is mine. It looks plural, but it's a collective singular, so it will always look that way. The next one is the word for war, melchama, or in the plural, milchamot. The next word is mishpat, and that's the word for law or justice or judgment, or mishpatim is the plural, so you can say judgments or laws. The top of the left column is ad. It means until or as far as. Can mean a few other things. For now, we'll just until or as far as. Im is with, im. And then we have the root for the word asa, to do or to make. The next word is kol. It means voice or sound. And we get the next word is the root for the word see. It's ra'ah. The next word is sha'ar, or sha'arim in the plural. It's gate or gates. And the last one is sadeh. Sadeh. It's a field, or plural, it's sadot. Okay, so right below that, it says the word ma has 3 different spellings. There's no difference in the meaning. So you have meh, ma, and ma. So, as I already said, the word maim for water, it really means waters, but don't think of it that way. It's just think of it as a collective singular. It's a collective noun, which means that it has both singular and plural meanings in one form. So whenever you see a noun that only has one form, it's probably a collective noun. Now we get into the meat of it here, right below that, the direct object. So we talked about direct objects before. But just to go over it, in English and in most languages, just make a simple sentence. You have a subject, a verb, and an object. So we'll say, Katie hit this. Katie hit the ball. I just missed one letter. Okay, so Katie is the subject. Hit is the verb. And the ball is the object. Now this happens to be a direct object. And it's a definite direct object. Because it has the word the, so that's the definite article. Of course, the is the only definite article in English, and it's also in Hebrew, of course, the hey. So, what we're going to do, since, let me rewrite this sentence a bit smaller. Since the words can be in a different order in Hebrew, for different reasons, we have this thing called a direct object marker. And it's et. Et. Now we don't translate that et into English. All that thing is just a sign showing that that where the direct object is, so we can have the sentences mixed up. So if we have the ball Katie hit all right, we can mix it up like that. And you put the ball. We could, doesn't matter what order it's in, if we put the et in front of it, we know that Katie's the one that hit the ball and not the ball hit Katie. Does that make sense? Okay. So the et always comes right before the direct object. Et ball. If you see the et, you know that the next word is the direct object, and the subject is acting directly onto that object. Okay, it's a direct object. Acting directly on the object.
So is it like the subject is the one doing it, but the direct object is the one that's happening to?
Yep. The object is receiving the action of the subject. So, of course, the action is the verb. The subject's the recipient, or the object, the direct object is the recipient of the action of the subject. And that et, all it is right there is just to show you which thing is the direct object, because the words don't necessarily have to be in a specific order.
Okay. So that essentially shows you which thing is the direct object and what thing is the subject, because it won't have the subject, won't have the et.
No, the subject will never have the et. The only thing that'll ever have the et is the direct object.
Okay.
An indirect object won't have the et either. Only the direct object. So it's just the way that Semitic languages work. I think just about all, maybe not every single one, just about all the Semitic languages have a direct object marker. Okay? So we don't need it in English because we have a particular word order that our sentences go in. So we know what the object is and what the subject is, but Semitic languages aren't like that. So right under, on page 60, right under where it says the direct object, it says very simple Hebrew sentences can be made using only a noun and a verb. HaMelech Zachar, the king remembered. Simple sentences can also be made using only a verb. Shamarti, I guarded. See, because you got that root shamar, and then you have the ending, you have the T on the end. Or you could say, amata, you stood. Okay? So you have a subject and a verb right there. It's just in that one word. Now, simple sentences can be made more complex by adding an object indicating whom the king remembered or what I guarded. So, we have the sentence, HaMelech Zachar Ben. The king remembered a son. Okay. So, the king is the subject, obviously, and remembered is the verb, and then a son is a indefinite object, because it's just a son. It's not the son.
Okay.
And it says, the next example they give there, Shamarti Derek, I guarded a road. In the sentences above, the words Bain and Derek are called direct objects. The direct object of a sentence is the thing or person which the verb acts. The direct object of a sentence answers the question of what or whom. So top of page 61. As you remember, a noun can be made definite by adding the hey. Easy, right? Mm-hmm. Adding a hey to the beginning of the word. Proper nouns, names of people and places are definite by nature. So they're already definite. So like we have names of cities like Jerusalem, or countries like Egypt or America or Israel or whatever, they're already definite. The name's already definite. Like David is already definite. We don't need to say the David or the Lee or the Katie or anything like that. The man, obviously it has the definite article. The city, the daughter. It's a definite one. We're talking about a specific one. Now you have an indefinite object, which just is like a man, a city, a daughter. It's indefinite. It's not necessarily a specific one. So it says the direct object of a sentence can be definite or indefinite. It's easy. The king remembered a son. That's indefinite. The king remembered the son. It's definite. You sent bread to Jerusalem. You sent the bread to Jerusalem. Okay? Keep going. In Hebrew, when a direct object is a definite noun, okay? So the object, when the direct object is a definite noun, it is usually preceded by the word et. The word et has no translation in English. It's simply used to mark direct objects when they're definite. That's all it does. And it helps you out when you're translating, and it actually makes it much more clear for you when you're reading the Hebrew. So the word et is sometimes spelled et. We will use the more common spelling et. The word et helps you find the definite direct object of a Hebrew sentence. When the direct object is not definite, the word et is not used. Okay? So it's only for definite direct objects. The king remembered a son. It's indefinite. Hamelech Zachar Bain. The king remembered the son. It's definite. So we would translate that. We would see it written. Hamelech Zachar et Habain. Et Habain. And of course, that you won't use the et when you go into your English translation. It says, you sent bread to Jerusalem. Shalachta lechem Yerushalayim. But if we wanted to say, you sent the bread to Jerusalem, we would use that et to show that that's a definite direct object. Shalachta et halechem. Say et halechem Yerushalayim. Here's one more. He guarded Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem is already definite. It doesn't need the hey. We don't need to say the Jerusalem. Okay? So we say, Hu Shamar et Yerushalayim. Et Yerushalayim. Abraham is a name, right? So it's already definite. We don't need to say they remember the Abraham. It's already definite because it's a proper noun. So we say, Haim Zachru et Abraham. Et Abraham. You'll see it in the Bible always like that. The only time you might not see it is in poetry, because poetry doesn't always follow a lot of the grammar rules, so that syllables match up, so it sounds poetic. Or for other reasons. There's other reasons, there's poetic reasons. Okay, turn to page 62. If a sentence has more than one definite direct object, the word et precedes each one. Okay? It'll be there for each direct object, and it'll always be right before the direct object. So, we have Abraham, Shalach et ha'ish, va'et ha'isha, va'et ha'na'ar la'ir. So we have Abraham sent et the man, and et the woman, and et the young man to the city. See? It'll be there. It'll always be there. Since the words in Hebrew sentences can appear in any order, the word et helps make complicated sentences easier to understand and translate. So if we didn't have that direct object marker, very much of the Bible will just be ambiguous. So it's necessary. So we see they gave us a little example there. The father guarded the son. Ha'av shamar et, or he guarded the young man. Ha'av shamar et hana'ar. Okay? Now look, they're going to mix it up. They're going to mix up the words in the line right below it. Et hana'ar shamar ha'av. It still means the father guarded the son. But if we translate it just very, very literally, we could say, Et, the young man, guarded the father. But since we have that et, we know that the father is the one guarding the young man and not the other way around. Because the word order can be different for different kind of reasons. If you want to put emphasis on something, or if you want it to sound more poetic or something like that. So we have David Zachar et Abraham. But you might see it written et Abraham Zachar David. So,
We know that Abraham can't remember David.
well, yeah. Abraham was before David, so you remember. But
I
what-
get it, I get it.
you get it, the example. Okay? Now, right below that. So the direct object stuff's easy, right? It sounds complicated, that's all it means. It's not anything else. It's pretty easy. It's different. But you'll notice that the words are mixed up. You might have to do a little bit of mental aerobics till you get used to it. But it helps you, so that you can be sure what the text says. The verbs haya, asa, and ra'ah in the perfect tense. So when we say perfect tense, you know how we're going to think of it for now is a completed action.
Like past.
Yep. A completed action. Perfect, it just is an old English word for complete. So all verbs have the same endings in the perfect tense. However, when the 5 guttural letters are part of the verbal root, various changes happen. In this chapter, we are introducing 3 verbs that all end in a hey, which is haya, a verb to be, was, is, be, asa, to do or to make. And remember last week I shared that little thing my teacher shared with me to remember the word asa. He said if you want to do something or make something, you need a saw. And the word ra'ah, see. They all end in a hey. So he says compare the perfect tense forms of haya with the perfect tense forms of shamar. Memorize the perfect tense forms of haya on page 62. So you will need to memorize that. Okay? They give you the example with the endings in the perfect tense for the verb shamar, because that's going to be our base word, shamar, because it follows all the rules. There's no weird stuff. Now, look on the left column underneath the haya or be. It shows you how to say I was, you were, he was, she was, we were, y'all were, and they were.
So I need to remember those just like I do.
Yeah, you need to memorize those like you memorize the shamar ones. Hayiti. I was. See, we have our root word for be. Oh my goodness. Haya. And you see it takes a similar ending like shamarti. A similar ending from ani or anochi, like I or me. Hayiti. Okay, so right underneath that you were. Hayita. 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 Yep. And the female one, it just takes, the kamates goes away, just like the female, how you say you for a female. Hats. So, hayit. And then the easy one, he was haya. Haya. she was. See, look, it takes the same patterns. If you look at the shamar one, you're noticing the vowel patterns, similarities. Hayta, or you might say hayata. We were. Hayinu. Hayinu. So ending like anachnu or shamarnu. Hayitin. Hayitin. Y'all were. Masculine y'all. Female y'all. Hayitin. Pretty similar. Shamartin, shamartin. They were. So we have shamarnu, or they were, or they. Hayu. Hayu. They were. So that's really not too bad. I don't think that's too difficult. You're just gonna have to get familiar with them. And learn the paradigm for the verb to be. So the verbs asa and ra'a are conjugated much like haya. For the exact spelling of these verbs, see the verb spelling chart on page 373. So there's something to check out when you do your homework.
Should we memorize those too?
No,
Okay.
but just be familiar with them.
Okay.
Get used to the haya stuff.
Okay.
Okay, so uses of et, asher, et, and ad asher. So the verb haya and the verb et on page 63. The verb haya, to be, it does not take a direct object, right? Yeah. It would be weird if it did, honestly. So that would be, what would you say? Et, be. Yes, they're just telling you that. Therefore, it does not take the direct object marker et. Okay? So we say, he saw the man. Hu ra'a et ha'ish. He saw et the man. Easy, right? Now let's say that he was a man. Okay? It says, Hu haya ha'ish. He was the man. Right, so we wouldn't say he was et the man. No, because it doesn't work that way. So we have, you can't say he be the man. Right, so it's weird because in English, we have the different words for the word to be. So we have be, and we have in the perfect tense was, in the present tense am,
Is
are, were, incomplete, or like future tense, going to be. So the next one, the king remembered Abraham. Hamelech zachar et Abraham. Okay, so you remembered et Abraham. The king was Abraham, or we might say Abraham was the king. So Hamelech haya Abraham. Makes sense? You see, I don't even know why they had to put that in there. I think it would be weird to put the et.
Yeah, I just didn't understand it, just like reading, like its explanation, but with the examples, it makes sense.
Right. Just, I guess, in case someone got confused on it, they would put that. Okay. The use of et asher. Et asher. You guys remember what asher means? That which. Stuff like that.
Okay.
That which, who, where. It kind of means a lot of stuff. And it's super, super common. Super, super common word. So the direct object marker et is sometimes followed by the word asher. And all it means is like that which. That which, or what. So asher means like that, or whom, or which. So if we say et asher, it's like saying that which. Let's see, they're going to give us an example. I remembered what I did, or I remembered that which that I did. Kind of older English. Zacharti et asher. Asiti. I remember et asher asiti. So I remember that which I did. We would probably, it's smoother English say, I remember what I did. The et asher is it has the et there because it's kind of like a direct object, because you're talking about a specific thing, but you're not mentioning exactly what that is. I remember that which that I did, that specific thing, et asher.
What is that last word? CT? What word?
It's from the word asa, to do or to make. You might even be able to translate it. I remember that which I made, or that which I did. Okay? The use of ad asher. Okay? So asher is a very common word, and it's got a very broad meaning. Are you starting to see why some of the translations in English are different? And you see it's not necessarily an easy job, because we want to put it into smooth English. So the phrase ad asher. So what does ad mean?
Odd is until.
Until, or sometimes we might translate as far as, or something like that. So it says, I walked until I saw the man. Okay? So it's just an idiom. Ad asher is an idiom. You know what an idiom is? An idiom is something that doesn't necessarily make sense when you translate it into another language. Basically, think of it that way. I walked until I saw the man. Halachti ad asher. Ra'iti et ha'ish. I walked ad asher. Always think of that, until. Until that which I saw the man. Okay, so how do you say there was or there were in Hebrew? So the verb haya is used very much like the English verb to be. Okay, it's not exactly the same thing, but it pretty much is, because it's a different language that comes from a whole different language family. But we have to relate it to the English, the language that we know the best. So the man was on the mountain. Ha'ish haya ad ha'ad, or excuse me, Ha'ish haya al ha'ad. The man was, past tense form of the word be, upon the mountain. The people were slaves. Hayu ha'anashim avadim. Hayu.
What's Hayu?
It is the they were. They were. Look right on page 62. Now you already know the Shamar paradigm. That's why I wanted you to learn that so well. See, look where it says Shamru. If I said Shamru, what does that mean?
They guarded.
They guarded, right? Now we know the verb haya to be. What if we say they were? Right?
Hayu. It just confused me
Hayu.
because it dropped the hay.
Yeah.
And I was looking for like a root,
You got used to it.
but it dropped the hay.
Yep. It's just the way it is. Hayu. They were. If we want to say he was, how would we say he was? Haya. Haya. And if we want to say she was, how would we say that?
Hata.
Haita.
Haita.
Remember, if you have an A class vowel followed by a yod, it's a diphthong.
Oh yes. Okay.
I. So you can still, if you were trying to really split, yeah. But you say it together, hi. And so for us, we're just gonna say, now if we had, okay, let's say if we had this, we would say hi. Okay, there's some people that would pronounce it, and it doesn't really matter. Some people would pronounce it more like hoi, hoi, when you have the comates, but we're not gonna worry about that. For us, it's just be hi, hi. Diphthong. Diphthong is two vowels together that makes a different sound. Like same thing we have in English, oi,
Okay.
oi.
It's the other way around,
Oh, sorry. Well, you're right.
but. Wait,
I'm gonna confuse anybody on the
you
video.
need to work on your English.
Yeah, well, I'm writing this way and then I'm writing this way.
I know.
Oi. Or I. What would be the diphthong in English for I?
For I, like A-Y.
Something like that.
A-I,
Or we might say A.
A.
That's a.
I-G-H.
Well, I guess technically not, because diphthong is two vowels together. Okay, fair enough. So the third person forms of haya, hayta, and hayu may also be translated there was or there were. Okay, so you get the idea. You gotta learn the forms of haya. Be familiar with those, because it's one of those things that will throw you off in your translation. You're like, what is that word? And you're like looking for a root. So a man was in the city. Haya ish ba'ir. Was a man in the city. More wooden name. We would translate it, a man was in the city, or we might translate it, there was a man in the city, or something to that effect. So we have haya, that's the second person masculine singular form of the word to be. So it would be he was. Who's the he? A man. Where is he? In the city. Ba'ir. People were in the city. Okay? So look at the word for people there. Anashim. It's plural, right? Because of the im. Anashim. So we'd have to say hayu. Hayu. Hayu anashim ba'ir. There were people in the city. If we said there was people in the city, that's probably bad English, right? Might translate it, people were in the city. We might translate it, there were people in the city, something like that. Now, the word lo, which you guys have already learned, it's a negation word, no or not, can be added to the above sentence just to make them negative. Just like the other normal way we use the word lo. It's easy. Ish lo haya ba'ir. A man was not in the city. Okay? There was not a man in the city. A man was not in the city. So, not too bad. Obviously not going to remember all this stuff because I just told it to you. So, learn the haya. Learn the verb to be. If you did good on your Shamar paradigm, it shouldn't be so bad. Shouldn't be so bad. Okay, page 64. The use of the word bane. That's a Nun Sophie. Okay. Oh. Bane. Not to be confused with the word for sun. We got the yod in the middle.
But on here it shows that the bet only has the 2 dots underneath it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Bane. Not bane. Bane. Okay. So it's a preposition. So preposition is a positional word, right? Into, on, around, through, between. So the preposition bane can either mean between or among. When the word bane is used in pairs, it means between. And this is just something you have to get used to. So when it's used in between, when the word bane is used in pairs, it means between. Give me an example, show you what I mean. The king went among the women, or I might say between the women. Hamelech, halach, bane, hanashim. The king walked or went between the women. We might also translate it, the king walked among the women. Okay, so the king went between the women and the children. Hamelech halach bein hanashim ubein habanim. The king walked between the women and between the children. Or wouldn't translate it that long in English. The king walked between the women and children. So they'll use the bang twice like that. You see? And it sounds a little confusing. I should spend a little time on that. So we have the king went, or the king walked, right? Where do you want to go? Between the women and between the children. That sounds redundant in English, but it's not in Hebrew because they're trying to be specific. So when we translate that into English, we wouldn't say the king walked between the women and between the children. We would just say that the king walked between the women and children. Got it? Okay. So the man stood between a woman and a cattle. Ha'ish amad bein isha ubein habahimot. Habahimot. Okay. Right down there where it says translation. Good Hebrew is not necessarily good English. So if you haven't noticed that already. That's why, like in the old King James, you see like this is not proper English, you know? But it's just these huge run-on sentences, but that's the way they're just trying to translate it more literally out of the Hebrew. So good Hebrew is not necessarily good English. A word-for-word translation will probably not sound natural to you. I think you've noticed that already. In order to make the translation sound better, it will sometimes be necessary to add, remove, or change the order of the words. Okay? Now, this is something that as y'all get into actually translate, this is something you want to be very careful with. This is a fine line. We're not trying to reinvent the text. We're not trying to add anything to the text or take away the text. I heard somebody say one time, we're not trying to translate what the text says, we're trying to translate the meaning of the text. Not necessarily. We want to translate what the text says, but we want to translate it into readable English. Now, that's not always easy to do, but we want to stay faithful to what the text says. That's why footnotes are so important in the Bible to explain, because something may sound ambiguous or seem to kind of miss the meaning of what it actually means in Hebrew. But we need to translate it for what it says into good, properly grammatical English. And if it requires a footnote for explanation, it just does. But we don't want to change the text. Our job is not to rewrite the text. Our job is to explain the meaning of the text. So it's a touchy area. So it's not an easy thing to do. So word for word, we could say, the man stood. It says, Ha'ish amad bein heharim ubein ha'ir. So I will translate, I'm just going to cover up the English, I'll tell you how I would just literally translate it. The man stood between the mountains and between the city. Now, how would I translate that in English? I would say, the man stood between the mountains and the city. Let's see what they gave us here in English. The man stood between the mountains and the city. So better English, the man stood between the mountains and the city. I did that wrong. The example they gave, I told you how wouldn't they translate it. They say, you got it. Okay, between the mountains and between the city. Better English would be the man stood between the mountains and the city. Okay, that's not changing the text. That's just translating it into readable English.
Right.
Okay? But we wouldn't want to go on and paraphrase that into something else.
Right.
That's my point. It says, Halachti el habayit asher yashavti sham. So I walked to the house where I sat there, or I dwelled there. They gave us the translations of I walked to the house where I resided there. To me, I think that's proper. That's fine, proper English. That's probably how I would translate it. They say better English is I walked to the house where I resided. Okay. The next sentence they give us, Lo hayu nashim ba'sadeh. There were no women in the field. Now, word for word, no were women in the field. We wouldn't translate it that way, right? Because that's just improper English for us. Same way, if we were translating, if someone was giving a sermon in a South American country where they didn't understand English and you had someone translating for you, they would translate that into proper Spanish for where it's correct. And it's easy for them to understand the message that's being spoken. They wouldn't do an English word order. Go through, same idea. Yep. Now the rest are just exercises here. They're exercises here. So, for exercises, I want you guys to do on page 64, exercise 1. It's pretty easy. Identify each of the following nouns as either definite or indefinite and translate it. Okay? There's 24 of them there. Be pretty easy for you guys. I want you to do exercise number 2. Read and translate the following sentences. Notice the use of the word et. So exercise number 1 and exercise number 2. That should be pretty easy for you guys. Turn to page 66. Let's look at exercise number 7. It says halachtu bain ha-se'erim el ha'ir va'ani hayiti sham ad hayom. Would you like to try to translate that?
I walked between the people,
The gates.
gates, to the city, and I was there something today. I don't know.
Until today.
Until today.
Mm-hmm. I was there until today. The next one. Hayu av ubat babait. Amda habat el ha'av. Ma, and then we have a question, right? It says ma, and it's quotes. Ma shamata ba'ir. You want to try?
The father was.
I would translate it. There was a father and a son in the house.
I don't know.
Hayu. Is
No, I
it?
got that, but the
So-
next one I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Amar. Amra.
It's from the word amar.
Yeah. Said.
So you said, right?
She.
Or she said.
She said.
Yeah.
Okay. She said. Habat. The daughter.
The daughter, she said to the father. The daughter, she said to the father, Ma. What did you hear in the city?
What did you hear? How do you know it's did? Where's did?
There's no did.
No did. Okay.
What you heard.
How do you know that there's, how do you add it?
I was just making it a good English.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
I just don't know the vocab very well, so I don't
Oh.
know what.
okay, we'll take a look at 7 and play around with it.
Okay.
Gotta learn the
I know-
vocab.
Yeah, I know some of it, but I don't know the new stuff from this chapter very well.
Okay, we'll learn the new stuff from this chapter this week. Do exercises 1 and 2. Get used to the Hayah. Learn the vocab very well. And then next week we are going to read on page 68. We're going to read the Tall Tale.
Okay, and then real quick, just for the people that aren't here, on page 59, will you read off the translation, because that was our homework from last week.
Okay? Ani yashabti. So, I dwelt.
I went, I put I sat.
I sat. That's fine. Yashabti baderech mi Moab el Mitzrayim. So I sat in the road from Moab to Egypt. Ata achalta, you ate. And that's a male you, right? Achalta hayom bifnei hamelech. Today you ate before the king. At lakach, at lakach. You took. So female, you took. And in the next sentence, you took children from the fathers. Number 4, he said. Second line, number 4, he said, I did not remember a young woman from Jerusalem. Line 5, she sent. And second line on line 5, she did not send bread to the house or food to the house. Number 6, we crossed over. V'nachnu avarnu, we crossed over. Second line, number 6, we crossed over from the city to the mountains. Line 7, y'all stood. Second line, y'all stood upon the land. Line 8, they took. Second line, 8, they took animals from the fathers and did not say a thing or did not say a word. Line 9, you stood on the mountain or on the hill. Second line, second one on number 9, you stood on the mountain and there you remembered a woman.
It's the mountain. Not,
You stood on the mountain and
okay,
there.
I put A.
Yeah, it's the.
Okay.
Number 10. It says, he guarded an animal and he ate bread or ate food. Second line on number 10. They guarded an animal and they ate bread. Got that one?
Yep. I put food, but.
Or food is fine.
Mhm.
Last one is food or bread. Number 11. You crossed over from Egypt and to Moab. You went. You crossed over from Egypt and went to Moab.
Is it you or is it she?
Oh, it's she. I'm sorry.
Okay.
She crossed over she crossed over from Egypt and went to Moab.
Okay.
Now, the last one on 11 is they crossed over from Egypt and they went to Moab.
Got it.
That's it. Okay, next week we will do the tall tale,
Need to learn vocab.
learn the vocab, or you ain't gonna be able to do this class. Everybody, learn the vocab or you ain't gonna be able to do this class. Okay, so we're gonna do the tall tale adapted from The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and then we're gonna do that first, and then next week we're getting into something called word pairs. This book's calling it word pairs.